The Behavior Analysis Regulatory Board meeting is convening at 9:09 a.m. on January 16th, 2026. The meeting is being held in person and through Zoom video conference and is being recorded. The recording will be posted to the internet for public viewing. I will now call roll. Megan Johns here. Jennifer White. Mason Williams. Samantha Parnham.
Here.
Marie McMahon.
Here.
Corey Stump. Jamie Whipple.
Here.
Lisa Herzig.
Here.
Members, when you wish to speak, please state your last name for the record. Board members are asked to not use the chat feature during meetings. The Health Licensing Office asks that individuals attending through Zoom keep their phones muted and their cameras off during the entire meeting or until they are given an opportunity to comment during the public and interested parties feedback period, if indicated on the agenda. Public comment is limited to matters listed on the meeting agenda or topics relevant to what this board is statutory authority to regulate. Public members wishing to speak, please sign in on the roster sheet available in the room or email Josh Page at josh.page@oha.oregon.gov and provide your first and last name. Everyone is asked to use appropriate language, manners, and protocols when conducting board business.
All right. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. So if we have somebody, if everybody looks over the agenda and if somebody wants to make a motion to approve the agenda, we can do that.
This is McMahon. I move to approve the agenda.
This is Parnham. I second.
And then I call everyone again,
roll?
right? Yeah, call roll. Megan Johns, aye. Samantha Parnham.
Aye.
Sorry, I don't remember who was here and who was not. Marie McMahon.
Aye.
Corey Stump. Jamie Whipple.
Aye.
And Lisa Herzig.
Aye.
All right. That's everybody. That motion passes. So the next item on the agenda is introduction of the new board member, Lisa Herzig. Well, how about we just go around first and we'll introduce ourselves and then Lisa can introduce herself when we're all done. I guess I'll start. My name is Trampishuk. I'm the Regulatory Operations Manager here at the Health Licensing Office. I'm kind of filling in the boardroom today for Bob Bothwell, who is our director, who is not here today. But I've been with the office for about 17 years in various roles. So I will also give an introduction over here to Josh Page. He is the person who you will have a lot of contact with as a board member. Who wants to?
I'm the board specialist. I've been with the Health Licensing Office for almost 2 years now. And yeah, I'm just the person that sends out any board meeting communications to board members.
I think we have some other staff on here. We may have the licensing manager, Tina Russell. We also have our, we're operating with a new platform today, Zoom. I know it's not a new platform, but it's a new platform for us. We've been using Teams. This is our first meeting of the new year where we switched over. So you may be having a few technical difficulties on mine, and I don't really see a list of everybody who's on the meeting. But we also have, we also have Ann Thompson, who you will have a lot of contact with as well. She is the policy analyst. She has a lot to do with all the details and law and rules for this group.
Thanks, Trampus. Hi, everybody. This is Ann. This was my first board when I was hired on about 12 years ago. So if you have any questions regarding laws, rules, or anything like that, you guys know you can always call me. We also have Chrissy Trampus on the line.
Hi, my name's Chrissy. I am the executive assistant to Bob Bothwell, and I primarily do the board member recruitment. So welcome, Lisa. Happy to have you.
Maybe we'll just go through the board as well, so the people on the board can make themselves introduced. Oh, now I can see everybody. There we go. Maybe we'll just go right on down the list. Megan, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Megan Johns. I'm a behavior analyst and I work as a behavior specialist at Oregon Trail School District now. And I've been on the board now for a while. I think this is my last year.
And Mason is not here today. Jamie?
Hi, I'm Jamie Whipple. I'm the parent seat on the board, and I have been on the board for about 6 months now.
And Marie McMahon?
Yes, hello, I'm Marie McMahon. I'm a psychologist in Portland, Oregon, and I have also been on the board for some time, 6 or so years. So, yeah.
And Corey, is Corey not here?
Corey's absent.
Corey's absent, okay, that's all. And then Samantha?
Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Parnham. I'm a BCBA. I'm located in Salem and I own Adventures with Autism. I have been on the board for 7 years. I think next year is my last year.
And Jennifer?
Jennifer White should be here. I don't know, she was the one that was going to be 5 minutes late.
Oh, okay.
So she's
Not here yet.
Not quite here.
All right, okay, well, so you got a sense of who we are, Lisa. Everybody's got a chance to say hello. Do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Lisa Herzig. Thank you guys for the warm welcome. And I'm a developmental behavioral pediatrician. I practice in Bend, Oregon. And this is my first time on any kind of government board. So I'm excited to be a part of this and learn more.
Great. Okay, so the next thing on our agenda is the director's report, mostly going through the member background and the recruitment process. I think that the only open position we have on this board currently, or a vacant position, is for a psychiatrist. So I'm not sure if that's a position that we have people knocking down our door for, or if Chrissy has any leads on anything for that position.
We do not have any applications on file for psychiatrists. So if anyone knows anyone, feel free to send them my way.
Chrissy does all of our board recruitment, and she does a great job of keeping all of our boards full. We have lots of boards and lots of board members of this agency, and she has to keep track of all of them and keep all of the positions filled. So It's actually a big job. So, but you can see in the materials here, we've got the different terms of the different people. We have Megan Johns, who's second term. It won't be reappointing, can't be reappointing, but goes through the full end of this year. Mason Williams, who's not here, his first term. He's going to be around until October of 2028. Gosh, that seems like a long way. Jamie, who's also in the first term, is also going until October 2028. Marie McMahon is in her second term. Can't reappoint, but we still have another 2 years. Corey Stump, same place, second term, but still here until 2027, end of 2027. Samantha Parnham is second term, still here until October. We've got a lot of people with the same dates. And then Jennifer White, who's here on her second term, but good for another 3 years. And then news member Lisa, who first term, first meeting, good until 2029. So those things like long dates a long way away, but they aren't. So, all right. So the next thing we have on the agenda is the board reports, the licensing and statistics. So we have licenses. The first slide is for licenses issued. We have behavioral analysts, as you can see. We have a couple of different fiscal years here. Our fiscal years run, of course, from July 1st to June 30th, so that is the typical fiscal year. So we have some statistics from each of those fiscal years for 3 years, including the 2026 fiscal year, which we're about halfway through. So you can see, quarterly, but I think the bottom line, fiscal year, we had 126 licenses issued for behavior analysts. 2025 was 104, and so far this year it's 68. So I don't know. It seems pretty. Those numbers fluctuate a little bit, but they don't seem to be, wildly out of sync each year. Behavioral analyst assistants. We have a few less of those. We have our fiscal year 2024. We had 8. Fiscal year 2020. Full fiscal year 2025 was 13, and so far this fiscal year, in which we're about 7 months into, or 6 months into, 6.5 months into, we've had 7 so far. And then behavioral analyst interventionist, this is where our big bulk comes from. 2024, we had 937. 2025, we had 1,113. And then so far this year, just this year, we've had 718. So I think we maybe are seeing a little bit of an increase on that, and we'll see a little bit later on licensing trends, how those overall trends go. But you can see licenses renewed for behavior analysts. And I think the big thing that you take away from this is the difference between online applications and paper applications. Of course, here at the Health License Office, we love online applications because they're a lot easier for us to process and they take a lot less staff time. But there are situations where people don't want to or can't renew on paper online, and so there is still a small amount of paper that's doing good. Behavioral analysts, assistant behavior analysts. That's a pretty small licensing group, so it's, but even then, most are still done online. Behavioral analyst interventionists. So this one you could, so for the other boards, you see a lot more, the numbers add up to the number of people that are in that group, that are actually licensed in that group. Behavior analysts, we have a lot more turnover. So renewals are a little bit less, say, than new licenses. But still, even of the renewals, most of those are done online as well. So that's a good trend. Licenses by age and gender. As you can see, it's actually, for behavior analysts, it's actually a pretty young profession, with the vast majority of the practitioners being in the 26 to 49 range. So that's actually, and actually it trends more on the the younger, 26 to 33 is the largest group. So that's actually pretty good. That means we have we're not going to be aging out. Some boards you see the opposite. All of the tall, all of the numbers are on just about to retire, and there's no new people coming in. So this is a healthy curve. Assistant behavior analysts, same kind of curve actually. And then of course, behavioral analyst interventionists, a lot of younger folks, 18 to 25, 26 to 33. I call that younger. That's for me, that's younger. But you can see that younger group there. And then licensing trends. So you can see on the licensing trends, behavior analysts over the last couple of years, it's just kind of slowly been increasing. It's not a really steep curve, but it's actually a nice curve going up. And then assistant behavior analysts, that kind of fluctuates. That's probably the type of one that you're going to see just kind of fluctuate over time. Not huge fluctuations, but behavior analyst interventionists, you can also see that group has really grown over the last couple of years significantly. The beginning of fiscal year 2024, we only had 1,457, and by the end of the most recent number here, halfway through 26, we've got 2,122, and I can say that group does feel really busy on our end as well. So with applications and stuff, we have a lot of applications and a lot of people coming through for that licensing group. So. Before I move on to fiscal, does anybody have any comments or anything they wanted to say about the licensing trends or questions for licensing or anything like that, or about licensing? No? Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the financial report. So your fiscal numbers are very strong. Your beginning cash balances are strong. Your ending cash balances you've got $1 million in the bank. Your revenues, fiscal year revenues, run about 350 to 431,000. Your expenditures are in the the 2.5 to 300,000. So you have pretty healthy net operations. It's always good to have a cash balance. At some point, though, your cash balance can get too high, and then we need to see what's going on, or if it's too low, we need to see what's going on. Right now, you have a pretty healthy bank. So. Okay, so the next slide is the regulatory report, and that's my wheelhouse. That's where I'm the regulatory manager, and you can see we have a couple of biennium on this regulatory report. The 2025 biennium, which actually ended on June 30th, 2025. So it actually looks at the previous 2 years. And then the 2027 biennium, which we're about 6 months into. Is that right? Yeah, we're about 6 months into that 2027 biennium. So you can see we have, of those complaints, we had 14 come in for the 2025 biennium, 14 complaints total for that whole 2-year period. 8 of those are still open or being investigated. 6 of them are closed, and you can see kind of the breakdown of what types of licensees those are actually against. We have behavior analysts, total behavior analysts of that 14, the behavior analysts, 7 of them were behavior analysts that are still open. 1 is behavior analyst interventionist for the total of 8. And then we have the behavioral analysts that, so it's mostly on the behavior analysts, some on behavior analyst interventionists. Currently, we have 4 open on behavior analysts and 1 on interventionists and 1 that is unlicensed. An unlicensed complaint, I can just tell you, An unlicensed, if we have a complaint that's against an unlicensed behavioral analyst, it doesn't necessarily always mean that it's for the practicing unlicensed. Sometimes that's an administrative cue that it was actually somebody filed the complaint against behavioral analysts, but it turns out it wasn't somebody who was a behavioral analyst, and it wasn't a complaint for behavioral analyst board, but it was all kind of filed on there. So it had to be opened under your group and then closed. So that does tend to happen. But this one, since it's still open, cues to me that it's a licensing issue. So licensing complaints by type. We got so far this year, we've had 2 licensing concerns, and that could be a licensing. So that could be a couple of different things. Licensing concern could be somebody's practicing without a license. It could be that there's a problem with their license. Like, it can also mean like if somebody had some kind of a criminal issue or some kind of a fitness issue. Sometimes those are open under licensing concerns. Sometimes those are also open under the second type if it's a mandatory self-reporting. If the person reports it themselves, it would be opened under mandatory reporting. Safety and sanitation issues, pretty small for this board. One, I'm actually surprised there wasn't one, or 2 of them total, but it comes up every once in a while. And then services provided, of course, is the vast majority of what we regulate here for this group is the actual services being provided. Complaints by type, we got anonymous, none. Clients, 3. Other, 19. So other is a big group. It includes a lot of different people. A couple meetings ago, we talked about the distinction between client and parent. Most of our other boards, we call the client the person who have actually received the services. But with this group, it's also the parent that we should be considering the client. We had a discussion about that. So I went through and kind of walked back through it and made sure that that was correct. And so client also for this group includes the parents. If a parent files a complaint on behalf of their child, then they would be considered a client. Other is just a big group. It could be other agencies. It could be themselves. It could be like those 2 mandatory reporters, which show up probably as other. So. In general, since we have a new board member, I'll just give a real quick overview of the regulatory process. So with this board, we have 20 boards, programs, and councils here at the Health Licensing Office. All of them are serviced by all of the different areas here. We have licensing, we have policy, who does all of the qualifications, they do all the laws and rules, they run these meetings. And then we have regulatory, which deals with if there's any type of a violation of laws or rules or a complaint that comes in, it all ends up at regulatory. For this group, it's almost exclusively complaint based. So somebody will file a complaint against somebody who they believe violated the laws or rules in some way. And when all of those complaints, any complaint that comes in, I look at it personally, decide if it's actually, if there's any, looking at the face of the complaint, if there's maybe a law or rule that might have been broken or violated, then I will move it on to an investigator. If not, then there's no rule violation. If it's like, oh, this person wore the wrong colored hat this day, or they didn't tie their shoes or something, we would close it out and done with it. But if it's something that actually is a violation of a law or rule, then we'll move it over to investigator. Investigator will look at it, run through the investigation. They may get records. They do interviews with whoever all the witnesses and the respondent. We have a subject matter expert that helps work with us because none of us are behavior analysts. So we use their expertise of a subject matter expert to help us with this. And if there's any kind of, after the investigation, if there is any reason to believe that a law or rule was violated, then those would be brought to the board and we would talk about it in executive session. We don't have any of those cases at this meeting, but I think we typically do. About half the meetings we have cases we're discussing. So. Does anybody have any questions about regulatory or about the regulatory process? No? All right. So the next thing on the agenda then is policy report, and that is all Ann.
Thanks, Trampus. This is Ann. Just for the record, Jennifer, I see that you're on with us now. Can you tell me when you joined so I can make a note? I don't know if she can. Jennifer, can you hear us? Okay, maybe she'll let us know. Good morning, everybody. For the record, my name is Ann Thompson. I'm your policy analyst. What we're going to be talking about today has been in the works for some time. A board member who is no longer a board member was interested in updating Rule 824-060-0010. It's in your packet. It's about standards of practice. In your statutes, your laws, it says that the board shall adopt ethics for behavior analysts and assistant behavior analysts. Interventionists do not fall under this. So when the board got started, they adopted the 2016 BACB Professional and Ethical Compliance Code for Behavior Analysts. You'll see in the rule it's number 2. And I've included it in your packet. What was nice about this one, we adopted sections 1 through 9. And if you go into the table of contents, I believe it starts on slide 30 of 63. In this document, what's really nice about it, and Trampus can elaborate if you have questions, when you are requiring someone to follow a code, you can't just say it's not fair and it's actually not a good idea to say, okay, whatever the latest version of the BACB code is or whatever, because who knows when it changes. That's not fair to licensees or any of the regulators or anybody else. So when they adopt this, if you look through the table of contents, the way this document is organized is pretty brilliant. You've got numbers that refer to specific things. So if somebody, we do an investigation, we find somebody violated a rule about consultation out of 2.0, the regulator could go directly to 2.03 in this document, look it up, see what it says, compare it to the investigation, and if we find them in violation, we can cite this very specific area. The reason the board adopted 1 through 9 is if you look at 10, it starts to say behavior analysts, ethical responsibility to the BACB. Now, it would not be appropriate for our board to require licensees to pledge allegiance to the association. That is not something we would investigate. That is not something that's appropriate. So if you notice in the rule, it adopts very specifically sections 1 through 9, which kind of talks about behavior analysis as a whole, right? Well, a couple of years ago, the BACB, I provided it at the last meeting. I didn't do it here because it's about 60 pages. The BACB in 2022 adopted a new ethical code. And that document, while this one board member who's not with us was very interested in saying, well, the latest is always the best. Let's move this profession forward. This document was really problematic. Some of our board members have seen this before. It is an extensive document, and it's not separated into these nice little neat chapters. It's very paragraph form. In the paragraph form, so that's difficult for a regulator to say what specific rule you violated when it's all a big text block, right? In addition, what was problematic about that document is it wasn't just ethical issues. They had a lot of things woven among it that were against Oregon law or weren't something that we had the statutory authority to regulate, right? So how do you handle a document like that? The board at the time asked our legal minds to go through the 2022 document and extract the ethical requirements that we could enforce, right? And see what that would look like. And that brings us, if you're following along in your materials, to a rule that starts on page 53. And what the DOJ did with us was extract the actionable items and put it in a format that would allow our regulatory unit to cite specific areas that a person might have violated. Instead of this 4-page paragraph, and we're trying to extract, this is essentially extracted actionable items from that document. Okay, we called it the redlined document. Is everybody following along so far? I know this is a lot in the Wayback Machine. We all okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Hello?
Yes,
Oh, you can hear me now. Okay, I really just wanted to see if you would be able to hear me now. So
I
this is
can.
Jennifer White. I've
Can
been here for a while, but just haven't been able to be heard.
Okay, wonderful, Jennifer. Thank you. Do you have some idea of when you joined so I can make a note?
Yes, I first called in probably about 9:07, but no one could hear me.
Okay, so you rejoined.
And then I was able to rejoin by video, but still no one could hear me. And now
Okay, but we
I
can
did
note
something.
you are with us fully at 9:41. Okay,
Yes.
fantastic. Thank you for letting me know. So, yeah, so this document that you see in front of us is essentially the BACB's 2022 code, the parts of it that we can enforce. And we've put it in a format that the regulatory department could cite easily. It's easy to read. But if you notice, like you get down to 3 on page 53, this is how chunked up it is. Sections 1.03 through 1.14, 2.01 through 2.03, 2.07. So it's not nearly as neat and clean as the 2016 document that we have. So when I brought this to the board, the last couple of meetings, and the last one, we had some new folks at the last one. This is something that the board wanted to discuss. The issues in front of you, well, the downside with this document is it's essentially an all or nothing document. We reached out to the BACB and said, even though they're very, very proud and protective of their intellectual property, would it be okay if we extracted this language in this way to use in rules? And the BACB said yes. Hold on. My plug pulled out. And so they allowed us to use this document, but in order to protect the board and HLO, we had them sign a licensing agreement, which says that they're going to allow us to use their 2022 code in this way. Okay? So we can't make any changes to it, can't put it in front of a rules advisory committee, can't ask how anybody feels. This is an all or nothing thing. Okay? So you don't have to make a decision today. You don't have to make any decision. But the question is, does the board, as it exists today, want to move forward with changing the ethical standards for behavior analysts and assistant behavior analysts? Or are you comfortable with the rule as it exists with this source document, the 2016? If we did want to move it forward, the licensing agreement, the licensed agreement document in front of you, this extracted document, would be in rule. The whole thing would be in rule. It's a little more difficult for regulators to go through and have to find the specific sections. but that's okay. So right now, I just wanted to open up the floor, see if anybody has any questions about what we have in place now. What is the proposed? I mean, there wasn't a lot of strong interest, but for this one board member, in updating the ethical standards using this licensed agreement from the BACB, this document that's in front of you now. I know it's awkward language. So what do you all think about? Do you have any questions about what's in front of you or how we got here today? Or do you have any strong feelings about moving this forward? We would have to adopt what the language that you see would actually be in the rule instead of citing this, the 2016. We would have this language right in rule. So, what say you, board?
Mrs. Barnum, I have two questions, I think, and one of them might not apply. Does anyone know off the top of their head what the like major changes between the original one and this new one is? I think for me and for the new board members, trying to pull the critical pieces from each one and see what the differences are is a bit hard on the fly. So that first question is if we have that. And then my second question is, this just applies to BCBAs and assistant BCBAs.
Correct.
But RBAIs are also licensed with the state. Do they have a separate one? Do they not have one?
Yes.
Okay, they do have a separate one. That was.
If you recall, we had, now, this is a really interesting question. You guys are also great at this. When the initial legislation went through, there were no ethics or anything linked to the interventionists. None. Recent legislation asked for the board to adopt, quote, professional methods and procedures. This is not ethics, right? And that was a separate rule that I brought to the board. I think it was not last time, but the time before, in response to that legislation. And we adopted professional methods and procedures. And that currently, if I can look that up really fast, it's its own standalone rule. And this is the one that we adopt. Again, it's not ethics. I did some research for the board and I worked with Trampus and talked to some other states and found the common areas that interventionists get into trouble.
Do you remember that now?
Yes, 824-060-0020 is the rule, and it says they can only perform duties within their scope of practice, tell a supervisor if they need additional training, gather and report data accurately, protect client confidentiality, those things, right? Report time accurately, do not accept gifts more than $10 from clients, don't engage in romantic or sexual relationship with current clients, must disclose any relationships with the client or the client's family to a supervisor and tell their supervisor if the client's family is requesting the performance of tasks outside the scope of the intervention plan. That is separate from what you're looking at today. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I do remember that whole conversation now. My brain is obviously broken in the new year.
Oh, no. It's okay. This is a lot. And so did you have, those were the two questions, right?
Yes, those were my two questions.
Okay. Because the interventionists are kept separate from the RBT and from the National Association. And this was deliberate on the point of the legislature. They very specifically wanted interventionists to be separate. So if we don't accept the RBT credential, they have to have the requirements and rule for training and active supervision. So any other questions? I mean, I guess the question is, number one, does the board want to move from, I think when I read the new BCBA code, there were some things on the use of social media, if I'm not mistaken, and a couple of other things. But it is a quite difficult document it's not as nice and neat as the 2016, in my opinion. It's a little harder to digest, but Jennifer, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to go into some of the differences between the versions of the code. And some of the things first they kind of streamlined it. So they went from 10 sections to 6 sections, and just for readability. And then they added cultural responsiveness, social media, updating supervision guidance, and clarifying service discontinuation. So it's just someone had asked that question, so it's just gonna bring that up.
Thank you, Jennifer. So the main question is, and I brought the document to you before. If you want, I could pull it up. Is the board interested at this time on moving from what we have, which Trampus can speak to, but it seems to be working, to this new licensing agreement document that you see in front of you from page 53. And again, see, this is the problem because it's streamlined and it's 6 sections instead of the 10. There were a lot of issues with some of the language that blends actionable items on the board's part and HLO's part, along with stuff that we can't do anything about, things that violate Oregon law, things that are outside our purview. And that's why the DOJ is saying, okay, if we have to, we're going to need to extract the things that are actually under our statutory authority into another document. And that's what you see in front of you now. And again, you can continue to think about it. At the last board meeting, when I presented the 22 standards and the 2016 standards in this document, the board didn't feel comfortable making taking any kind of action. They said, "Oh, we want to think about it some more." So, have we thought about it? I see, Jennifer, your hand's still up, and now I have Samantha up.
I'm sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
Okay.
My question is for Trampus, I think, and I'm not sure what we're allowed to ask or not. But from like an investigator standpoint, which version is the most efficient? I don't think efficient's the right word. Which one gives us the best outcome for all parties involved?
So, I mean, I think from a regulatory standpoint, we're always going to work with what we're given to a certain degree. I don't think we run into a lot of problems we have not run into any problems with the old one, the one that we're currently using being outdated. I don't know how much of a major change we would see line for line on each one of these, or what we would lose. That would be kind of that'd be a tough comparison because they are such different documents. Whenever you start dealing with a situation where you're only taking this section to this section, and then these sections, and then this section to this section, that does become a little bit more difficult to manage during an investigation as to whether or not the conduct that the person engaged in, violates, which one of these. Oh well, it violated this one, but that's not included in our group. So it does become a little more complex if the newer standard was to be adopted in this kind of piecemeal way. That does become a little bit more difficult, but none of it is not is unworkable. It just becomes a little trickier. But so far, we haven't had any problems with the old one being the current one being outdated. But I think that's gonna. That depends on the people. You are the experts in the profession, and whether or not the things that we would be regulating with under the current one, if they become like, oh well, this is no longer the standard of practice. Somebody's doing it, but they're following the old one. But now there's a new thing they're supposed to be doing. they're doing the old thing and they haven't switched over, and now there's no, they're saying, well, it's okay for them to do the old thing because they're in that. I don't know that there's any of those conflicts yet from these two versions of the standards. But I think that people that are a little more deeply into the profession may be able to point those things out if they exist. So
This is Anne. I think
I mean, bottom line, but whatever is going to be the best thing for your standards in your profession.
Trappist, this is Anne. One of the things that would be a small complication, it's certainly not insurmountable because doing the right thing is always the right thing, even if it's hard. An investigator would need two documents. They'd have to have this in front of them, and then they'd have to have the 2022 BACB standards in front of them, and they'd have to refer back and forth.
Yeah.
So that would be, I mean, having two source documents is always more complicated than having one. But mainly what we refer to it as the red line, which is going through the 2022 and going through and highlighting the things that were actionable. It was more an action of curiosity on the part of this board member to see what it would look like what we could actually extract out of this. And that person was an attorney. So they had a very different perspective on reading material than perhaps others. Do we have any feelings, any questions, anything that's bubbling up that you guys want to talk about? There's no pressure to take action today. We can continue to think about it. I can get additional resources if that would be helpful to you.
This is Jennifer White, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but okay, I'm looking at this and refreshing myself again, and 2.04 on the 2022 code and 2.05 were not included in this about confidential information and documentation protection. Why weren't those ones added in?
Okay, are you talking about slide 54, where it goes from 203 to 206?
Yes.
If it was taken out, I do not have my the attorney with me right now, but things that were taken out either conflicted with current confidentiality statutes that this board operates under, or violated in some way Oregon Constitution, or was outside our purview. So we have existing statutes regarding confidentiality, 676, 590, 595, the use of investigations, or, shielding information and that kind of thing. And if it's not here, it's because it likely clashed with existing statute.
Got it. That makes sense. I could see the ones that were referencing the BACB, and that totally made sense. But yes, that makes perfect sense. I guess just in my opinion, that I would prefer to the rules stated on page 53 and on. I prefer that than sticking with the old professional compliance code. So I like this one that updates the applicable sections of our most recent code.
Okay, so Jennifer, you are liking this document.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay. How else are we feeling? Jamie, we haven't heard from you today.
I actually was wondering if, really the BCBAs on the board, I think, are some of the best to be able to tell us if this document, is creating, if it's confusing, if it's, I'm hoping that everyone's going to be complying with the ethics, but obviously, things happen. And will it be difficult for the BCBAs to implement this new, more confusing ethics with all of their employees and whatnot?
This is Jennifer White. I don't think it will be because this is our our credentialing code of ethics. And so for years, this has really been hounding into us. And to become a BCBA, you have to take courseworks in ethics. And this is what those courseworks are teaching and referring to. So I think it's actually more confusing for state's behavior analysts to have something that's different or not up to date with their current code.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Megan, how do you feel?
I feel honestly fine either way. I feel like, I mean, the reason for me to be able to switch it would be if things are falling through the cracks with our investigations and stuff like that. If that's not happening, then I think, I mean, I see Jenny's point and I agree that makes sense in terms of us analysts. And but then I also am like, when it creates more work for the people investigating claims, like it doesn't. So I feel indifferent, maybe.
That's fair.
This is Sam. As a BCBA, I feel the same way as Megan. I think both are fine. I don't know that I feel strongly either way.
Lisa, do you have any feelings?
I am trying to just understand everything, but can I just ask a clarification question? Was Jennifer, were you saying you were in favor of the 2016 or the 2022 version?
I'm in favor of the 2022 version.
Got it. Okay.
That would be the redlined document that's provided in the materials, Lisa.
The red-lined document.
Yeah, if you're looking at the materials, the kind of grayish blue document that ends at page 52, that is the current 2026 ethical standards. And in rule, the sections 1 through 9 were adopted as the code. That's what's in place right now. Starting on page 53 is the information extracted from the 2022 BACB standards that as a board and as a state, we could act on. There was a lot of materials. We can't just adopt, with the pretty cover and the colors and everything, because there were items that in that document that were outside Oregon law, that conflicted with Oregon law and were outside some of the board's authorities. So the DOJ went through and extracted things that were actionable by this board, and that's the document that you see starting on page 53.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. I think just hearing the discussion, it sounds like there aren't problems with the current one, and it might be more complicated to start using the new one. But I think I still want to hear more thoughts from other people.
Sure.
This is Jennifer White. I just thought it might be helpful to say what specifically was updated, because there were quite a few updates between those codes. Like one section was cultural responsiveness and diversity, non-discrimination, awareness of personal biases and challenges, the changes to giving and receiving gifts.
Can you cite those sections for me?
Yeah,
here, so I can follow along.
Can I share the document with you
Sure.
that goes over it? Okay, that might be easier. I just wonder if that helps people with seeing like why the BACB updated what we already have, and what specifically was changed in it. Let me share that with you. It's a lot. It's like a lot of things. So
Yeah,
maybe...
I brought it to the board before, and I didn't want to overwhelm.
Yeah, it's just a lot of stuff. So, and some of them are the ones that weren't applicable, but most of them are not. So I'll share it. Would you like me to go through each one, or should I just share it and everyone can look?
If you want to highlight the new stuff, what I like about that is then I can go through and kind of match it up with this document and see, what we were able to retain.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is from a BACB newsletter that was highlighting the changes. Okay, and I sent it to you.
Okay. Do not have it yet. I do not have it yet. So while we're waiting for that one, it looks to me like Jamie was neutral. Okay, oh, and it arrived. Okay, from the newsletter, and I did not get this newsletter. It says the new ethics code. Yeah, specific changes. Section
There you
1,
go.
yeah, 107. I'm trying to look on here. Uh, yeah, it looks like that was taken into account in the updated document. 107, flipping all over the place here.
And the new document you proposed would have all of these changes in it. It's
Well,
just these are the changes. If we decided to keep the 2016 ethical standards, they wouldn't have these updates.
okay.
But that what you've made on starting on page 53, that would have these updated changes.
If these sections are in the red line document.
Yeah,
That's
some of
the
them might
thing.
not be applicable.
Right, just because they're here doesn't mean they made it into the red line. And I can go through if somebody wants to look at that, because there's only so much layering I can do on my screen. But 107 is cultural responsibility and diversity. New standard to clarify that is the responsibility of behavior analysts to actively participate in professional development activities related to cultural responsibility, responsiveness, and diversity. 108 is non-discrimination. 1.10 is awareness of personal bias and challenges. 1.12 is giving and receiving gifts. The standard has been revised to indicate that a gift exchange is allowable, providing that the monetary value of the gift is under $10. What's interesting is that kind of matches what we did for the interventionists. 1.14, romantic and sexual relationships. 208 is communicating about services. 211, obtaining informed consent. Section 3 is responsibility to clients and stakeholders. Third-party contracts for services. Facilitating continuity of services, appropriate discontinuing of services. 403, supervisory volume. Yeah, I would have to go through and see, because I didn't get this particular document, to see what was retained and what wasn't. Because just because it's new doesn't mean it made it into this document that you see in front of you today. Responsibility, okay, public statements by behavior analysts, soliciting testimonials from current clients for advertising, social media channels and websites, research and service delivery, and informed consent in research, the 603s. I'm not sure that, okay, yeah, it says 603 did make it in. So yeah, it's very piecemeal as to what made it in. And I think, yeah, 604 did, 606. I think the things that were actionable, that fell under, and we all went through board training. We can only do as a board what we are given specific statutory authority to do. So even if it's a good idea or something that an outside entity says is a good idea, it doesn't mean that we have the specific authority to do it. That's why you see something like on page 56 where 604, informed consent and research, that was okay. 605 was not. 606 is back, right? So this is why the DOJ went through and specifically said, okay, do we have the authority to do what is mentioned in this language? And so what that big document was distilled into this. And the question remains, do you want to stay with the old or do you want to move to the new? And it looks like we have one person who likes the new document, the extracted whatever. We're going to have to come up with a name for it because we actually had the BACB sign off on it. So it's called like licensing agreement something. And then we have three people right now who could go either way, and Jamie sort of abstained. So do we want to take an action today? Do we want to continue the conversation? Maybe do some research on our own and compare what the old one was to the new and how it works in the practice? I mean, how are we feeling? We don't have to take an action today. We can just talk about it.
This is McMahon. Just one thing I'm trying to clarify. I feel like I'm hearing people talk about the 2022 ethics, but on the paper it says 2020, and so I'm just.
I think let me see when it was there might have been a different adoption date versus what was on the cover.
2020 was the date it first came out, and then 2022 is the revision date. So like if you're looking at
Yes.
our ethics code document, it'll say copyright 2020, but then it says
Okay.
like required to adhere to 2022.
Yeah. That was where I was getting my date from. It said that they were required to adhere to the code effective January 1, 2022. So this is when it sort of became actionable, and that's where I got my number from. So I'm sorry if I confused anybody. But this is their most recent one. Now, what's interesting is they haven't published it yet. I believe they're working on a 2025 version. And it may look different from their last one that led to the differences that created the need for this red line document. And we can wait and see what comes out of that one. We don't, we've got something in place now that's working. The the problematic thing that we see is that normally whenever we're going to change anything like this, we want to do a rules advisory committee, not just because it's required, but because it's the right thing to do, and ask the general licensing base, well, how do you feel about this, right? The problem is they can't change one word of this document, this red line document, or it'll violate the licensing agreement that we have with the BACB. Because they specifically looked at this that starts on page 53 and said, okay, the way you did this, we understand why you did it. And we're okay with this exactly. And if we took it out if it went out for public comment, like you decided to adopt the proposed rule maybe at the next meeting or whatever, if this went out for public comment and there was a groundswell that said, well, no, I don't agree with, number 3 little I, there's nothing we can do. Unfortunately, this is an all or nothing situation. It's all in or it's not. We can't make any adjustments to this document, which is new for me. Normally it's like, well, we'll adopt sections. I mean, we've done this with some of our other boards where there's national standards, and they'll say, well, we like sections 3 and 4. We'll adopt those, but then we want to kind of go off the map and do our own thing in these areas. We can't do that with this. This is all or nothing because we don't want to violate that agreement that we have with the BACB. That if we choose to use it, it's all or nothing. Does that make sense?
It does. And I wanted to say if they are coming out with something, you said that I guess they've been working on it for 2025. I'm assuming it will come out in this next year, maybe.
Let me take a look and see if they have a publishing. That's a great question.
Because in that case, I think we're maybe doing a disservice by doing this now and not just going from what comes out more recently.
This
Okay.
is Jennifer White. I think one thing to consider though is when they do come out with a new code, it'll still be quite a while before it's actually in place for behavior analysts to follow, because they give like a year, sometimes like 2 years warning before it's actually like put in place. I also sent in the updated version of the code, and I highlighted which things were not in our new version that was made. So I don't know if you want to share that with people so that they can see what things were not included, if they feel that's important or not. Personally, looking at it, I didn't see anything that I felt like strongly about that wasn't included in these new ones. Another thing I wanted to bring up was just like one of the reasons the BACB made those changes to the ethical code was, based on reports of complaints that they get and clarifying some of those areas. And so I think that's something to consider, because those are areas that it's showing need more guidance for people. So just some food for thought.
Yeah, I noticed the highlighted areas fall under confidential information. And that we have this board and HLO and professions widely have confidentiality requirements. And so you can't adopt something that conflicts with that. And the other one is documentation, protection, and retention. I'm not sure where that is. Because again, we also have retention policies in Oregon. I mean, we joke that we have to keep things forever, but we also require for like continuing education and things like that, we have our own requirements for document retention. So looking through. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, so the confidentiality was not adopted in the new document because obviously there was something in it that conflicted with Oregon law. But 405, maintaining supervision documentation, that is in the new document. Let's see what else. Third-party contracts for services, 307. Thank you guys for being so patient. Yeah, it looks like 307 conflicted with something. The third party, that was not retained in the red line. So there must have been a conflict.
This is McMahon. Can I ask a clarifying question?
Please.
So for those things that conflict, like, the confidentiality, what happens with that? So then we don't have a statement regarding that ethical obligation, or that's just like it's not under ethics, but we have addressed it somewhere else. Can you talk about that?
Sure, and Trampus can probably jump in here because he deals with the world of confidentiality all the time when it comes to investigations. But we have existing Oregon law that outlines what materials are protected, what processes are protected, and under what statute. And you can't adopt a standard in rule that violates or conflicts with Oregon existing law. Trampus, do you have anything you want to add to that? Because that's your world.
Yeah, so I mean, if you were to have something in here that was, say, more lenient than Oregon law, like allowed you to have a, to disclose something that Oregon law wouldn't allow you, or some other, rule or statute that you're following, we would have to, that could send a mixed message to somebody as to what they were allowed. So they may look at this and go, okay, well, Oregon's adopted this and I can give this information out, but then Oregon law doesn't allow you to give it out. You know what I mean? So that if you have a conflict like that, you may end up causing somebody more problems, or what, and then somebody may say, well, the ethical standards say I'm allowed to do this, but Oregon law doesn't say you're allowed to do that. So not that I have any specific examples in this that that's the case, but yeah, I mean, confidentiality, the standards of confidentiality and not giving out information is also covered in our standard, kind of our standard professional standards. That
Got it. So what you're saying is that it ends up being a legal issue, right? Because someone's broken a law versus an ethical issue, which can be different. Am I understanding that right? So, or don't panic, we've got it covered. It's just not, it doesn't fall under this ethical documentation paperwork.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things that if when this has been gone over by the policy and they've gone line by line, okay, well, there's something problematic in this particular new standard that they put out.
Yeah, sorry, Trampus, one of the things that didn't make it in was compliance with supervision requirements. Your statutes have supervision requirements built right in. So you can't adopt an ethical code that conflicts with existing statutory supervision requirements. Does that make sense? That's why that section was left out. And again, you can see why certain things were extracted. Let's see. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at this with that same line. Well, why are we leaving that out? That comes up every once in a while, but then it's part of it. A lot of time, in the majority of those cases, it's because something conflicts with something we already have, or we already have something that this seems to kind of change or mess with.
Right. And the whole section 5, there's a huge highlighted section 5 that did not make it into the red line document because I can see how it would conflict with free speech. It talks about, public statements by behavior analysts, public statements by others, use of intellectual property. That's kind of outside the realm of what this board has statutory authority to enforce. Advertising services, that's not something that would fall under your statutory authority to enforce. Soliciting testimonials, again, you get into speech, you get into advertising. You don't have statutes that address those issues. When you get into free speech, you get into use of advertising, that is not something this board has the authority to regulate. So you can't really adopt requirements on a licensee that violates Oregon's free speech laws or, commerce, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I would add that you may be able to look through and find pieces in there that make sense or that wouldn't, but when you have to take that section as a whole or that piece of it, it becomes really problematic if part of it or some of it falls under that. But there's a lot of other professional standards at the health licensing office that licensees have to follow, just in general around a lot of these things, truthfulness, for example, and not advocating a service or saying that a service or something that you're providing is going to do something that it won't, being truthful in your advertising. All those things are actually covered in other areas of the health licensing office that all of our licensees have to follow, not just behavior analysts.
Right.
So some of those things, they may seem like they're missing, but in reality, they're covered in a different way somewhere else in a cleaner way.
Thank you.
Yeah, but again, I don't know that we haven't really had we haven't even had any problems currently with the standards we're using versus, oh gosh, we're missing this. We haven't come across that case yet where the current standards that we're using for 2016 have been inadequate to deal with the the situation, but again, if there is some small nuance that has changed, I don't know of that situation, so.
Right. And to Trampus's point, I know, yes, we have this document that we adopt in rule, right? Sections 1 through 9. But there's also additional layers of regulation that licensees have to follow. As Trampus pointed out, Oregon has its own confidentiality statutes. We have unprofessional conduct, 676, 612, which covers things. We have an additional set of rules that cover all of our profession, the HLO, unprofessional conduct rules that we've been adding to over the years as loopholes in various things have been found, right? So this doesn't stand all by itself alone in protecting clients and Oregonians. There's layers and layers. And I think that's what made the updated BACB standards a little difficult because they had sections and phrases and requirements in there that clashed with or just didn't dovetail nicely with existing requirements. So this updated document that I brought to you today was kind of the parts that didn't conflict and were itemized that way. So I know this is super awkward and weird. I've not had to do this kind of a red line document with a licensing agreement with anything else before, because we've had standards that have come up with various boards where specific sections they were outlined very clearly, line by line, and there were specific sections that were just basic good sense stuff, right? And you could cut out the things that maybe we didn't have authority over, like billing or use of CPT codes or anything like that. So it was very neat. And so we could just say these sections we adopt. One of our boards had one issue that they wanted to kind of go off and do their own standards on. So they say, okay, in this one area, we'll do this, but we adopt 1 through 8 of this particular document. That way, licensees are very clear on what they have to follow, right? So
This is Jennifer White. I just want to say, I think that the new document you created is great. I mean, I know you had that a lot of things had to be gone through to pick out what was able to be done, but I feel like a lot of the important stuff that isn't covered in other areas is in there. So, as I stated, I like the document. I think that it would be good to go ahead with it personally.
okay.
This is Herzig. Does anyone see any problems with the new document? I'm just curious as I'm learning about all this, if other than it being, I think I heard that it might be more complicated because if we, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if we adopt the new one, then investigators have to have both documents available to kind of look at.
Not just investigators, yes, you're correct, but also licensees would have to have, the BACB source document in one hand and the rules in the other hand and
Okay.
go through and say, okay, because I mean, some of it's written out and some of it, if you look on page, like especially on page 53, under 3 they would have to go through and go section by section by section and say, okay, I have to abide by 1.03 through 1.14, 201 through 203, 207 through 214. And they would have to go through and piecemeal using this in one hand and that in the other. So it's not just, it's licensees as well.
This is
Okay.
Jennifer White, but keep in mind that I just think it's important to point out that ethics code is what's drilled into behavior analysts,
Sure.
like from their coursework time. So, and required for a credential to be a BCBA. And so it's not like that code is unfamiliar to us or something we're not already going to anyway.
That's a fair point.
Okay, so this is Herzig again. So the problem that you point out, and it seems like at least from an ABA perspective, isn't a huge deal. So I'm just wondering if there's any other things that people see that could be problematic.
I'm not hearing anybody. Well, you could. Here's another option if you wanted to, because what's in front of you would be the proposed rule, right? Instead of saying we're referring out to another document, this would be it right here, right? What we could do is at the next meeting, I could bring back the proposed rule because, we can't do anything that's not on the agenda, right? This was just a discussion. If you're interested, at your next meeting, I could bring the proposed rule, a schedule, saying like what the rulemaking schedule would look like. We would have to get a Rules Advisory Committee exception because again, we can't change one comma or it would violate the licensing agreement with the BACB. And you can adopt the proposed rule if you like and put it out for public comment and just see what the community as a whole thinks about this. And then I would gather all that up for you. And this is not legislatively required, right? I could bring the comments to you, and if there's a groundswell of support, great. If there are issues, I could bring that to you, and you could decide if you want to adopt it permanently, or if you just want to say, I think what we have based on the comments we received is going to work. That is an absolute option that's available to you.
This is McMahon. I like that idea because I just like to see some movement on it either way, right?
Mhm.
So I think that would be helpful. I like that idea.
Samantha?
I was waiting until my bird stopped screaming. I actually, I think that I'm sort of moved more towards like adopting this new one. And I think it's more in line with like the moving forward rather than waiting. I feel like we do sit on things for a long time, and I know that that is necessary completely. Um, but like having had more time to kind of look over both and sort of get my brain to figure it out, I think that I would agree with adopting this one today. And also, I could go. We could not do it today, and I could still accept that. So that's kind of where I am after the conversation.
Okay, well, we can't adopt, just to be very clear, we can't adopt anything today because we did not have moving forward with rulemaking like that step on the agenda, right?
Got it. Okay.
So we were just discussing if we wanted to, and if you want to, that would be something that I'd put on the next agenda, and I have all of that ready to go in that direction. But I didn't have clear direction at the last meeting. I was told to bring it back and we'd think about it. So I've got a couple of folks that are comfortable kind of moving forward into rulemaking, if I'm capturing this correctly.
This is Herzig. I'm in favor of what you suggested, and with talking about it next time and opening it up for public comment.
Well, what we would do is the next step would be I would bring this document in front of you as a proposed rule, like a draft rule, and then you guys could adopt it as a proposed rule. And the next step would be it would go out. It's formal. We would say we're in rulemaking. We're putting this out, and it would be distributed to all of our interested parties and our licensees as a proposed rule. And we would gather what's called public comment. It's not a dialogue. People just tell us how they feel about it. And then I would gather all of that up for you. And then at the subsequent meeting, I would do a report and say, okay, this is what came in. Here were some areas of concern. And then the board can decide to either adopt it permanently or to back off and say, okay, this wasn't going to work the way we thought it would. But yeah, it's the rulemaking process, and I would manage that for you. And that would be something we would do at the next meeting. We'd put it on the agenda that the proposed rule was a possibility, and people would know what was going on. Does that help, Lisa?
Yes, and I like that option.
Okay. So Lisa and Samantha.
I like that option as well, Jamie.
Jamie likes that one. Okay, so it looks like we're going in that direction. Are we all okay with that?
This is Jennifer White. Yes, I'm okay with that.
Wonderful. Okay, well,
This is
I will have
Megan.
that.
I'm okay with that as well.
Thank you so much, Megan. Well, I know this is hard and it's odd, and you guys have been really thoughtful about it, and I appreciate that. So I'll have that all set up for you at the next meeting, and we'll see what happens. So thank you very, very much. I believe that is all I had for you today. Let me go back up to the agenda and make sure I covered everything. Oh, yeah, and I have some fun things to report outside of this. At the last meeting, there were a couple of communications that were discussed. One was letting parents, interested parties, everybody, and I mean, we can't reach parents, right? So we did our interested party list, which has a lot of advocates and things on it. We sent out a communication about the complaint process. I believe Jamie thought it would be good to remind people of if they have a concern, how they would get in touch with the board, with the health licensing office to file a complaint. So included in your packet is communication that went out in July, right after your meeting about that. So we did that for you. And the other thing was a communication to supervisors. There was some conversation at the last meeting about common issues with licensing, places things get stuck, some issues. And so we sent a clarifying communication out to licensees about common application issues, some things that can slow down processing of paperwork, documentation issues, criminal background check questions, just sort of a clarification. Hey, this is how it works. If it's not going smoothly for you, this is where things get stuck and how you can avoid those areas. Okay? Did everybody get a chance to see those?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
See, you ask, we do. This is who we are.
Yeah, I really appreciated seeing that. That was exactly what I was thinking of.
Oh, that makes me so happy. I mean, again, we're more than happy to communicate. When people tell us that there's something we can clarify or something we can remind people of, we're happy to do it. And it's always nice to prevent a question than have to solve the problem afterwards, right? So if that's everything, does anybody have anything else for me to do? Otherwise, I can go back to Trampus in charge and public and interested feedback, interested parties feedback. Does anybody have anything for me? I guess that's no. And thank you all so much for participating in the policy section. Trampus, back to
Right. So the next item on the agenda is public interested parties feedback. And Megan, you should have a script for that, for the section.
You got it. At this time, the Behavior Analysis Regulatory Board will hear public and interested parties' feedback. Public comment is limited to matters listed on the meeting agenda or topics relevant to what this board has statutory authority to regulate. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes and will not be allowed if they are disruptive to the board's conduct of its business. If you are called on to comment, HLO staff will request the public member to unmute themselves. The chairperson and HLO reserve the right to end a person's comment early and have HLO staff mute the public member if the comment does not pertain to matters listed on the meeting agenda or topics relevant to what this board has statutory authority to regulate. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment? If so, please raise your hand or use the Zoom raise hand feature and wait to be acknowledged.
Yeah, Christina here in person.
Yes, so we have somebody in the boardroom, Christina.
Need to move anywhere in particular, or can they hear me okay here?
Should be good to go right there.
Can everybody hear Christina?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Perfect.
I can hear you.
I had three brief ones. I'll go over them each briefly. My first one is I wanted to petition to remove language from the competency assessment that behavior analysts complete. It's on section 5 of the competency assessment. It asks that us behavior analysts are attesting that the interventionist has completed this assessment prior to working with clients, and that we agree to ensure that this is done annually. I think that that language is asking us to attest to something that we're not physically able to do in a lot of cases. There's also the line somewhere else on the form as well. But what happens is oftentimes I'm assigned technicians that I have been working with clients and that we know have not completed this, or we cannot confirm that they have completed that. And so it puts us in this really awkward spot of we're doing the right thing and completing the assessment prior to them working with our clients, but we're not actually able to attest that that had been the case prior to assignment with us. So I think that the ownership is kind of on the wrong spot with that attestation. This is something that we brought up within our company, and they've reached out to state. We've been told to just cross that section out. But I think just removing that language would make sure that we're properly attesting to completing this assessment and committing that we'll attest to that in future ones as long as they're still assigned to us. I think that would be much more appropriate. And then I wanted to advocate as well for how this assessment is completed. For context, I'm autistic. I am also a behavior analyst. I've been in the field for about 10 years. One of my concerns with this is that this assessment does not need to be completed with a client. And so if we're assessing a behavior interventionist and their performance based on a role play with an adult who has conversational skills, it is not representative of what their skills will be like with a nonverbal child. I've seen this lead to safety issues where people have passed this competency with myself or others based on role plays or interactions with verbal adults, and they do not have the skills with nonverbal children. And so I don't think that the way that this is issued, where there is not a requirement for this to be completed with the demographic that they'll be working with, doesn't actually capture a true competency. So I don't think that it's necessary that the entire form, or I don't even think it's appropriate that the entire form is completed with clients, but at least like 50% I think would be appropriate. I don't know if there's a way that we can measure that, set that expectation. Because there's things like not every client will have DTT or NET. It's not possible to find a client that will perfectly represent all of the skills. But I think that a good effort should be made to evaluate those in person with the client would make a really big difference in the care that we're signing off on for our staff. And then my other piece was I was looking at the licensure for the other boards under the health licensing office. We operate under the BARB. To my knowledge, from what I understand, we are the only field under the HLO that does not require in-person training. Not to be flippant, but I've received more hands-on training working in like Cold Stone and food service than what we require as a state for working with autistic children. And I want to advocate on behalf of other autistic individuals. I don't think that that's sufficient. I think that we need to have at least, I would recommend 40 hours of in-person training. I've worked with a number of technicians that have come to me across multiple companies that have received the didactic training, but they don't have the physical, practical skills to keep kids safe within often their first like 1 to 2 weeks. I think it really takes a couple of weeks of hands-on to truly understand the basic safety components. It takes a while to really get comfortable and gain an expertise in our field. But I think it takes at least a couple weeks to get the core components down of hands-on when we're looking, especially at nonverbal kids. We work with a huge demographic from little children to adults, but it takes a good amount of time for people to really understand the behavioral side, how to communicate, how to treat them with dignity, and to get that feedback. And I don't think that the state has a minimum that is appropriate for true quality of care at this time. I've seen a number of injuries result from again, like if I were to pretend to run off from a trainee and sign off, like, yes, they did the appropriate things to stop me, that's very different than a 2-year-old running full sprint while they're helping prepare a snack, right? We don't have the ability to properly assess or ensure that they're adequately trained for safety, I think, at this time. And I would like to ask that we add a standard for in-person competency that's aligned with other boards that we see in the healthcare professions. Thank you for listening to my TED Talk.
Great. Are there any other public comment?
the only one that I knew
Yes, yeah, I think you're the only public. We have that. Okay. All right, well, thank you. All
Thank
right,
you for
so,
being with us.
I'm sorry.
No, I just said thank you for being with us, Christina, and you reached out in advance, and that was very helpful in planning and knowing you were going to be here. So thank you.
Thank you guys for your time.
Of course.
All right, so we are on to other board business. Is there anything that the board would like to, or anybody would like to talk about? Maybe something that people would want on the next agenda, or any of the board business? HLO doesn't have anything new. I don't have anything, unless Ann does.
Well, I have obviously the rulemaking structure around the ethics will be prepared for the next one. And before while you're rolling things around in your brain pan, if anything comes up between now and if we have cases or anything, we might put a special meeting together. But our next scheduled board meeting is July 10th. And if you think of anything in the meantime you want to add to the agenda, you guys can always reach out to me. But is there anything that was discussed, anything you'd like to look at or think about for the next board meeting? We'll know by then if we've had any legislation go through. I have not heard of any proposed legislation affecting this board, but the legislative session, which starts, we'll probably get bills next week, is something of a jack in the box. You never really know what's going to come out of that thing until it pops. So
This is Parnam. Public members' feedback. Can we because I think what was given to us is worth a conversation at the BCBA 100%. Can we that as point to discuss next meeting, or what can we do with that feedback that we got?
Okay, yes, absolutely. A lot of the forms, just for folks that, may not know, a lot of the forms are based on statutory requirements that were put in place when the board emerged, when it was new. And if looking at because there are certain requirements with interventionists, 40 hours of training, and there's rules around that. If the board would like to put on the agenda that they want to look at, do you want to look at the whole scope of interventionist training documentation requires around that, or you just want to look at the competency assessment form? Do you just want to kind of look at all the materials, or is there part of it?
I could be convinced either way. My inclination is to look at all of them, but then I understand that that is also a very large task. It'd be better to just do the specific piece that was brought up. I'm wondering if anyone else feels either way.
There's no task too big, Samantha. Don't worry about it. Well, I see Jamie's hand, Maria's hand, Megan's hand. What have you got?
I was really wanting to discuss next time the in-person training aspect of that of what she had said.
Okay.
This is McMahon. I agree. I think all of the points that were brought up would be important to talk about next time.
Okay. So if I'm gathering all this, Megan's got her hand up.
Yep, this is Megan. I agree. I think when a lot of those things went into place, if I recall correctly, too, we had a lack of interventionists in the state. And so we were really trying to get more services out to more families in a more expedited way. And so now obviously there's always going to be a little bit of a shortage, but we're not quite at the same level that we were previously. It's good to revisit some of those things.
Oh, no, we have thousands. Jennifer?
Hi, this is Jennifer White. Just agreeing with everyone. I think it's time to look at all of those things. So that I would be in favor of that, but at the minimum, looking at the points brought up today.
Okay. I was here and I did all the documentation for the interventionist, and I will tell you that it was something of a chaotic time. This board was born in fire, and the world has changed a lot in your profession. And the requirements, what's interesting is when I started, just for historical purposes, there were a couple of BCPAs that were running these small practices with a couple of interventionists. And now we've got companies, right? We've got the whole landscape has changed. So I have the historical knowledge. I can talk to you about where the stuff came from. But if it makes sense, we can put on that you want to look at the package of interventionist registration. What do they have to supply? What does the training look like? Where did it come from? The 40 hours of required training and the differences in the world now and what you might want to change going forward. And whether we have to, usually forms follow rule or statute because you can't require something without pointing to it. So we might have to make some adjustment in rules, or within the rules, maybe there's some things we can do with the forms at that level. But I can bring that whole picture to you next time as well, and maybe look at refreshing that. Jamie?
Can we get the forms and the requirements, what they're expected to do,
100%.
maybe earlier on, so we have a lot of time to think about what we would like to implement?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I never want to ask you to do is to look, and this is why we get you cases in advance too, right? Like, because you're thoughtful and you want to think, you take a look at things. So what I'll do is I'll get the materials together. If there's something that's in play, like we're not sure if we're going to have cases or not, I can go ahead and get the current rules, the current statutes around interventionist registration, and all the forms out to you well in advance. So you can print all that out and look at it. And that way we can have super efficient conversations coming back. Does that make sense, Jamie?
Yeah, that'd be great.
I can absolutely do that. What have you got, Jennifer?
I forgot to lower my hand again. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, don't be sorry. Participation is awesome. So I'll get all of that out to you. And it does feel like this would be a good time to kind of look at today's world and what makes sense for today and tomorrow, right? Was there anything else you wanted on the next to look at the next board meeting? It's going to be lots of good stuff. Nothing? Okay, then I have my marching orders, lots to do. So Trampus, back to you.
Well, if there's no other board business, we can, you can read us out, Chair.
The Behavior Analysis Regulatory Board meeting is adjourned at 10:51 a.m.
Everyone.
Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
Trampus,
Have a
I'll
good
stay
weekend.
on.
Thank you.